was left to me as a teenage boy and many other boys like me to actually take up arms to defend the community. It was a bloody horrific time with bombs going off in Belfast. Major issues that aren't being reported in mainstream media.
Hello and welcome to Unheard Voices with me, Jasmine Birtles. Now, today I'm joined by a really good friend of mine, Martin Snodden from Belfast, who's an international independent trainer and consultant. He's also a former combatant and political prisoner. Now, the reason I've brought in Martin today is because of a conversation I had with Dan Wootton on his Outspoken programme recently, particularly about Tommy Robinson. And talking about Tommy Robinson's background and what shaped him to be what he is, it made me think of Martin's experience in Belfast during the Troubles. So that's why I've asked you to come on, Martin. And I was wondering, firstly, if you could give us an idea of your background, really, particularly what shaped you during the Troubles. What is it that made you get to the position that you were in, where you were in prison for a while?
Well, in terms of whenever you consider the lovely little environment that I was living in, and then we had the outbreak of what becomes known as the Troubles, so the violent conflict in Northern Ireland, and that was August 1969. I was 14 years old at the time, and at 14 years old, I had a sectarian uh, experience where older Catholic lads had been coming into our community and they attacked friends of mine, school friends of mine, and I decided that I was going to support them, as we do within our community. We stand up for each other against outside aggressors, and things just got progressively worse with regards to sectarianism. And the attacks on my community itself actually motivated me to become a defender to the fore of that particular community. Our normal enforcement officers, the RUC as it was, the police service of Northern Ireland, and even whenever the British Army came in, they weren't protecting my community. They arrived after incidents, not protecting them from the incidents. So it was left to me as a teenage boy and many other boys like me to actually take up arms to defend the community from being shot at and bombed on too regular a basis. And as a 16-year-old, I had a gun in my hand to defend the community. I looked at my own son at 16 years old and I thought, God, what were we doing whenever we were that particular age? But what we were doing was with honourable intentions to defend the community. And it was the provisional IRA and the ultra nationalist aggressors that were coming into our community and intimidating over 500 families to leave their homes. So it had to be stopped. And the way that I chose to stop it was by bomb and gun. And rather than waiting on them to come to me, I was going to take their war to them and give them a taste of their own medicine. As a result, I ended up in Longcash prison camp as a 19-year-old for a bomb and gun attack on an establishment that was associated with a provisional IRA, serving a life sentence and 20 years for causing a bomb explosion. I was held, I was incarcerated for my convictions, not for the convictions that the court gave me, but for the convictions that I have for my community. I was held in prison for 15 years and 3 months, along with hundreds, if not thousands, of other young men from both communities in Northern Ireland who all ended up in prison and probably all for the same reason in terms of trying to defend their community. The Irish Catholics were trying to defend our community from British, and we were trying to defend our community from them. So it was a free for all. It was a bloody horrific time with bombs going off in Belfast and people, no warning bombs going off, people being blown to pieces, friends being killed, coffins being carried on a regular basis. So they all had a major influence. And the prison actually created a space for me to reflect as I was devouring the books in prison, to reflect on that journey and the decisions that I've made in terms of my honourable intentions, but questioning my actions with those honourable intentions. And the reality was that, like many others that ended up in Long Cash, my actions were determined by my capacity to do something. And with a very limited education, I had very limited capacity to challenge those. And I'm not even, even if I had a master's degree, I don't think I would have stopped the provisional IRA from bombing and shooting their way into my community. But it would have changed how I could have approached something I believed. I could have challenged it in a different way than by using the bomb and the gun, which just ultimately led to more of the same in Belfast for decades.
And that is quite an experience, Martin, and thank you for telling me about it because, as I'm listening to it, I'm thinking, well, in Luton, they don't have bombs and guns. They haven't got people being blown up. And that's what Tommy Robinson grew up with. But he did, it seems to me, that did have to deal with and is still dealing with a culture clash. Do you feel any sympathy for his view on things, having been brought up in a tough area, but nowhere near as tough as you?
Those culture clashes that he's experiencing are happening all over the United Kingdom. They're happening all over Ireland as well. We had interfaces between Protestant and Catholic in Belfast. We have now got ethnic interfaces developing because a lot of those migrants who are arriving in the UK are being put into working class communities. And as a result of the limited resources that was always in those communities, there's increased competition for resources, for doctors' surgeries, for police support, for school places. And probably the big one around at the moment is about social housing. And the reality is that social housing exists in working class communities. It doesn't exist in the leafy suburbs that you described, Jasmine. And it's the same here in Belfast. There is no hotels and no social housing in those particular areas where people are coming from to say, yep, open borders, open doors, but they're not actually offering to bring those people in who they're bringing in or supporting to come in to the country. So there's big issues around. And in my capacity as a trainer and consultant and facilitator, I have worked with groups with regards to what they're experiencing to help them because they like me have a limited capacity in the working class neighborhoods. So I'm actually helping them to pause, to think, to actually check what information they're receiving. Is it disinformation, misinformation, malinformation, propaganda? It's very, very difficult for ordinary women in working class communities who are concerned about their children, their sons and their daughters being attacked on the street. And that's the reality of it. And we need to support those working class communities rather than throw labels at people who are raising the concerns and the issues and actually calling for the state to step into that void and actually support the people, the citizens of the United Kingdom, all the citizens of the United Kingdom, to actually bring about some kind of harmonious experience for people without actually putting their backs against the wall.
So, when you're doing these facilitating sessions with these groups, do you find that it's mostly women who are there, or is it a mix?
The last session that I done is less than 2 weeks ago, and there was two males and seven female in the room, and there was more females who couldn't come because they were looking after their children, but who would have been there if they had been able to bring their children along with them. So it's certainly predominantly female who are coming to these workshops. And it's also predominantly female that I'm seeing, whether it's a social media posts or whatever, who are now on the front line protesting. And it's understandable, I think, that they are there because as a mother, they're trying to protect their children, and that's the motivation factor that they have. The reality is that they're calling for support from the government, and the government that they're calling for the support from, they no longer trust. And that's a big issue. Trust is a big, big issue.
And you're not just talking about the UK government here, you're talking about the Irish government as well, because I know you do a lot of work in the Republic of Ireland as well, don't you?
Fully, I'm talking about the Irish government, I'm talking about the French government, the German government, the Italian government. The government in Ireland has, it's almost like they've divorced themselves from the people of Ireland. They have lost that sense of responsibility for national sovereignty, it would appear. So there's major, major issues that aren't being reported in mainstream media that's taking place in Ireland currently. And I have to say that what I've witnessed, I've seen it getting worse, not better. And there is nobody actually facilitating the people to come into the room, lock the door, nail the windows down, let off the steam. Once we let off the steam, then things can get that bit calmer and we can be more strategic with regards to who we're challenging. Because the reality often is it's not the people who are locked up in those hotels that are creating the problem. And we need to identify where these problems originate. And our government is one of the originators in relation to that. So we need to find ways to make them accountable for what's taking place in our society. You know, in World War II, they were able to stop the Germans coming across the channel. Now they can't stop them on the blooming dinghy. And in actual fact, they're not even trying to stop them or trying to help them. So there's a lot of people have, you know, great questions that they're stating time and time again. And all that happens is that people throw labels at them. They don't actually address the issue, the facts that that they are actually presenting, and checking those facts. Are they real? Are they imagined? Where they come from? What's the agenda of those that's pushing them? And that, you know, within that frame of checking those facts, the government is actually right at the heart and the core of that. And we're talking about people actually checking the government's facts as well, because they have been found to be at fault with regards to disinformation that's being presented through mainstream media.
And do you feel that there's a deliberate attempt by governments to encourage more immigration, to replace the current population with people from outside? Is that just a conspiracy theory, or have you seen evidence of it?
Well, it's certainly a conspiracy theory, and the government has never admitted that's what their intent is to denationalize the countries and that side of it. But whenever you look at what's taking place and what's not happening by the government, then you've got to seriously question that particular conspiracy theory if you want to label it as that. But the government are spending huge amounts of money to support people who are coming here, to support them while they are here. I mean, and it seems to me to be a very simple solution to turn that tap off. And if people who are coming for to get that welfare support aren't getting it, they might actually go somewhere else for it. You know, they're not going to come to a barren place. And I sympathize with a lot of those people who are actually coming for to try to create a better life for themselves. I sympathize with them. And I believe that they should be coming through the legal channels. And there's more migration through the legal channels than what there is through the crossing the channel between France and England there. So there's big issues with regards to migration and big questions to be answered by those in power who are not simply addressing the concerns of their citizens.
Absolutely. This is what we're all seeing, that the government is not answering the questions. As you say, it's just labeling people who are questioning and complaining as far right extremists, etc. But do you think that this is why people like Tommy Robinson have such huge support? I mean, hundreds of thousands of people are supporting his protests, etc. Are they pushing people towards the Tommy Robinsons of this world?
My major concern with regards to this situation is that there's a conspiracy theory that the government is doing this on purpose. They're creating a chaos so that they can later step in with a pre-prepared solution, such as facial identities and economic control. And that is something that my jury is still out on, because the access to the information is difficult to actually come to a satisfactory conclusion in relation to that. But there's certainly, evidence of two-tier policing. There's evidence of two-tier judicial decisions, and that can't be contested because it's very clear. There's evidence that our British Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, is probably one of the most hated people by its populace in Europe, if not the world. And people have they have a great time with some of the songs that they're singing about him. And I hope his ears are open because there is a massive, absolutely massive amount of people that are coming out on the streets all over the British Isles. If I can join Ireland into the British Isles and with the British Isles, we have people in Ireland, north and south, who are stepping up to the plate to give leadership, and some of them are really good leaders. Some of them are in leadership positions and they're not good leaders, and that's cause for concern as well. Those people who are in leadership positions could be supported by thinking people rather than labeling them, bringing them in and discussing things with them, and mentoring them and shadowing them with regards to peaceful protest as opposed to violent protest. Violent protest is not going to be beneficial to their mothers, their wives, their daughters, and their children's. So that's not what we want in our society. In fact, that's what people's coming out and pushing back on with regards to law and order, and justice and equality as well. There is so many regulations and legislations that have been put in place to try to prevent people having free speech. The very simple fact of free speech, or even prayer in the street. How ridiculous in the British society is it for someone to be arrested and possibly imprisoned for saying a prayer in the street or for conducting some kind of public service? It's just so unbelievable. And whenever they're holding that up against what is taking place and being allowed to take place with regards to protests and all kinds of flags flying at those protests, it's just, it's just ridiculous that that is what's happening.
So, with your experience, and you've had a good long experience of all kinds of aspects of conflict, not just in this country, but in Haiti and in Africa and Middle East, you've been at a number of discussions to help resolve these conflicts. With all of this experience, what would your advice to our government be? Not just our government, but you've mentioned European governments. What's your advice to them to prevent what seems to be mounting protests and potentially revolution?
It's really very simple, Jasmine, in the sense of they need to listen to the people. And once they've listened to the people, they need to identify what the people's issues actually are. And once they've identified what the issues actually are for the people, then they need to address them. And whatever that takes, that's what needs to happen, so that people are satisfied with the solutions and the imposed solutions are not going to exaggerate the conflict itself, which is what's actually taking place now. So the British government, I think Keir Starmer's went deaf to the citizens of the United Kingdom because he doesn't seem to be acting on their behalf. And we know that there was a video clip of Keir Starmer actually saying that he would prefer to be with the World Economic Forum than to be in Westminster, the mother of parliaments, and he wants to be somewhere else. If he's short of a few pound, I'll buy him a ticket so he can actually go somewhere else. And I think a lot of the people in the country would actually sponsor him to fly in the best of 747s to get there first class. One way, of course.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I think there are a lot of people who think that way. So finally, Martin, what would you say to Tommy Robinson? Because it was Tommy's experience that sparked this conversation. What would you say to him as to how he needs to behave in order to be more effective, if you like, in society and not be frozen out by the establishment? Or do you think that that's necessary? Is he actually in a better place being frozen out by the establishment than he would be if he were welcomed in with open arms?
Well, I think for me is that the way the establishment has frozen him out has actually contributed to the growth of his popularity
Mm.
across the country.
Mm.
And he's speaking with the people's language. Tommy, I think needs to slow down a bit, calm down a bit. He's an intelligent guy. There's no question that he's not an intelligent guy, and he's an articulate enough guy. But he needs to find other ways to actually achieve a vision that he would aspire to with regards to our particular country. And that vision needs to be a joint vision for all of us rather than just a vision for one particular identifiable group, but a vision for all so that people can come along. And I know that Tommy would describe himself as being open for anyone of any particular ethnic background who wants to support the country as a whole in a particular way. And I think that's a good thing. But whenever I see Tommy sometimes being very animated on the television, it's the vision, not what he's saying, that actually turns people off a bit. And people find him a little bit frightening with regards to that. And it's easy then for others to actually label him as being this demon who is aggressive verbally and physically. Like they're trolling Tommy's life for negative aspects of his particular life experience, just to throw the labels, to distract from the issues that he's actually raising. So I would certainly suggest that he has a punch bag outside the room and he beats the hell out of it before he walks in nice and calm, collected, and presents his issues to all of those people who will find bravery somewhere to go into the room with Tommy and actually talk to him, not talk down to him, but talk to him about the issues that he's raising on behalf of the British public by and large. And there's lots of people, middle class people, upper class people, who are actually saying the same thing, but they're whispering while Tommy's shouting. And the cameras go on Tommy whenever Tommy's shouting.
Yeah, I think that is one of his biggest issues, really, as you say. It's the patent anger that's barely contained, and that worries people. It frightens them. Yeah, he needs to take a chill pill, I think, before people
He needs,
will.
he does. Like he's got, he must have energy coming from the universe. This seems to be what Tommy was born for. It would appear to me that this is his life, and I think he could manage it better, being calmer, and being more open, if you like, to just sitting down and just talking through his issues, without being so excitable during those interviews.
That's sage advice, Martin. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. Hard-won wisdom with hard experience. This has been Martin Snodden in Belfast, an independent international trainer and consultant. And do come back to this podcast next week. I will have another unheard voice giving their wisdom. This has been Unheard Voices with me, Jasmine Birtles. Like, subscribe, and do comment. I do take notice of all the comments and I reply to the comments. So do comment. We're always very interested to see what you have to say. Thank you for watching. Come back next week.